And I would like to welcome you to our last session. And this session we titled, this session is about design. This session is about the question of how do the policies, culture, aspirations, challenges of communities, how are these ideas manifest in the way that we design the built environment. And today we have 3 speakers who I'll introduce in a minute. But first I'd like to share something. So in a certain way, this conversation is really odd for me, because I was not brought up in a single-family house. I was actually brought up in social housing built by the International Lady Garment Workers Union in the city of New York in the 1960s. And, yeah, the Penn South Co-op. And that co-op, where my mother fortunately still lives, my grandparents were immigrants. My parents were the first ones to go to college. My grandfather did not finish high school. That co-op, which was built to keep the middle class in the city, was what enabled our family to build enough wealth so that my brother and I could go to college, and so that we now are able to own housing ourselves. So that co-op, interestingly enough, at the time, International Lady Garment Workers Union, which is the area people know as Chelsea, right? What now people know as this hip neighborhood, was not hip or wealthy at the time, was dominated by a lot of Jewish immigrants who came from Europe and who were social democrats, democratic socialists, anarchists, communists, you name it. And I grew up handing out leaflets for the internal elections that would always happen in our co-op. So these housing units were built during an effort that was established in New York State by 2 senators, Mitchell and Lama, right, in which there was housing built, the coops in the Bronx, co-ops in the other Bronx. My grandmother was from the Bronx, all over New York. And the idea was that this housing was built to provide affordable and social housing. So, figure out which is on. So this is my house. It's on 27th and 8th. Behind it we see Trump Towers, right? And at the opening, at the groundbreaking, you can see what a different time we're in, President Kennedy spoke. And he said at the time, we believe that there is much left to do, and I come here today and ask you to join us in doing it. About 30 years ago, a distinguished French marshal asked his gardener to plant a tree. And the gardener said, that tree won't come to flower for 100 years. Well, he said, of course. In that case, let's plant it this afternoon. Well, that's the way I feel about the task left undone in this country, which will not be finished in our time. But we ought to do something about it this afternoon. So I'm really appreciative of everybody here and the effort that we all need to do together. But I think it's important to realize that the American dream is not singular. The American dream was not for everybody to own a house. My mother has the best apartment. People would kill for this apartment right now. And the way that this housing was structured, which provided 2,000 units in Chelsea, was that you paid according to what you earned. So as my parents' income went up, their rent went up, and now that my mother is a widower on her own, her rent's gone down. And at a certain point, the co-operators built a cogeneration plant, and they voted not to make it privatized. So sadly for me, but good for other people, my mother can't hand this apartment off to me. I just wanted to share that because I think it's important to realize that how you set the table, that there's other ways to set the table. And we've set the table in other ways in this country. And we can do that again. So for me, the first time I lived in a single house was when I went to college, which was really strange, kind of spooky to have nobody around me. So with that, I'd like to start and welcome our guests. We start with a guest from Vienna, and the first person who we will join us is, and I'm sorry, I lost my papers today, so give me a minute. Well, it's Katerina, and let me just find that. Okay, is Katerina Bayer, who's an architect from Vienna, and we've given her more time because we really would like to hear from her. And her expertise is in the architectural aspects of social housing, and she'll share with us some examples of her social housing projects. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and for kind of representing all the Austrian architects that work in social housing. And as you can imagine, as you heard today, this is a very rewarding and very constant working field for architects in Vienna. And thank you, Ronit, for this really nice introduction, because I thought our systems are so different, but of course also in Vienna we have different forms of housing, but I guess also here you have different forms of housing, and it depends on where we put the emphasis, or where we want to put the emphasis on. So let me start with my presentation. What I want to show to you after a short introduction about our motivation to work in this field is to give a short insight on the general framework for us as architects in housing, to show the current challenges we are facing in this field, and then give you some short insight in 4 projects we worked on the last years. Actually, 2 of them are co-housing projects and 2 are normal subsidized housings. And in the end, I guess you might be a bit tired already because it was a very dense afternoon. I want to show you a short film of 3 minutes so that you can get really lively insight in one of our projects, the Wohnprojekt Wien. It's a 3-minute presentation. So this is our team. We are 25 architects working mainly in the field of housing, and it's all, or most of it is subsidized housing and multi-story housing. And we also, in this field, we have a specialization. We as an office, Architektur, we specialize in the field of co-housing projects and cooperative urban planning processes. So where did this come from? Actually, like many small and young offices, we started to build single-family houses, small refurbishments, and on the other hand, and what we liked about it is actually that in this project we could work very close on the needs and the individuality of the inhabitants, and we could get really special solutions. But on the larger scale, we all know that single-family housing is not a sustainable form of living. It uses too much land, resources, and it produces a lot of traffic. And on the other hand, it also costs a lot, not only for the individual, but also for our society. Yes, you can see in these statistics that it actually costs 10 times more for infrastructure costs than more dense developments. So actually, we wanted to contribute with our work to the more densified housing, in the urban housing. This is a picture of the city of Vienna from above, a typical Gründerzeit quarter. And you see it's very dense, and therefore it's very sustainable regarding resources, mobility, and all these aspects. But it shows its deficits often on the individual side and on the smaller scale, that there is a lack of possibility for communication, for individual expression, and there's no space for self-determination and self-management. So what actually we wanted to contribute is with our work to bring somehow together the best of two worlds, the sustainability and the individuality of these single-family houses within the city of Vienna. And of course, as you also see in the exhibition, all these ideas are not new to Viennese housing. We are here in a long tradition of architects working in this field, and actually also the really first big super blocks, as you can see right in the right above picture, the Karl Marx Hof, had a lot of shared facilities, community spaces, even rooftop pools are quite common in Vienna, as you can see in the left down picture, a project by Harry Klück. And also the idea of participation has a long tradition in Vienna, inhabitant participation in multi-story housing, as for instance the architect Ottokar Uhl in the 70s already realized such projects. So all that we do, actually, we did not invent, but our aim is to adapt it to nowadays needs of the people and of the culture that, of course, changed in all these years. So, as an architect working in housing in Vienna, you also have to know very good the general framework. We heard a lot today about the Viennese model and how it is built, and I think it was Kurt Stutzenbecher already mentioned the four-pillar system. So actually, if you do a project in subsidized housing in Vienna, it will be judged by an interdisciplinary jury on this four-pillar system, which means you do not only have to deliver in a concept of architecture, but it has to, you have to have a concept of social sustainability in economy and ecology, and at all these categories you have a lot of sub-categories that you have to address to. And if you look at the definition of sustainability, actually it shows the same picture, that and you can put architecture development in the middle here and say that architecture is only sustainable if it is environmentally, economically, and socially durable. So this actually fits very well with this four-pillar system, and I think it's an important aspect. So as you, if you have to develop concepts in all these fields, it is also clear that you cannot do this as an architect alone. But for these developer competitions that were also mentioned today, you have to form project teams together with a developer, an architect, landscape architect. Very often sociologists, engineers are already part of the competition team, and even social service organizations or user groups can be part already in the first phase of planning. And then I can also say that the process of design is changing also of these projects, because what we faced in the past is that we have a linear top-down planning from urban design to architecture, and then the tenants move in. But I think if you address more complex challenges, we also have to rethink our design processes and try to bring these planning processes together, that they can develop at the same time and that you can learn from all aspects. So from urban planning, user participation and architecture are developed at the same time very often in these projects. For instance, this is a picture of a cooperative planning process that that shows that many experts are already involved in the phase of the urban design process. And as you can imagine, if so many people work together along these complex processes, I think one ability is very important for this kind of work, and that is the ability to cooperate. Because you have to know how to talk to each other, how you can make decisions in big teams, and it's actually what also Richard Sennett says, that cooperation is that what keeps our society together, and that what will make us really successful to address to the challenges. So that brings me actually directly to these some challenges we are facing, and we can say that we also face a lot of challenges in all these categories. We have economic challenges regarding affordability, speculation, land costs, social challenges like demographic changes, dissolution of classical families, and also ecological challenges as we now face with the climate change and the massive land consumption. So I brought some statistics to illustrate what we are dealing with in Vienna, and this is, for instance, a statistic that shows that from 1971 the living space per capita doubled from 22 to 44 square meters. And this means not only that we need a lot more housing surface in the city of Vienna right now, but it also means that it is nowadays very often a problem of affordability, because these bigger apartments we build and we live in are not affordable anymore. And it is also not ecological to use so much surface to heat it, and of course it affects also land consumption. So what the city of Vienna, for instance, did to address this challenge is that they presented the smart housing program, which means that 1/3 of all subsidized flats have to be, they call it smart homes or smart flats, and they have a limited square meter per type, and this means that they lower the average to 25 square meter per capita if they are fully booked. So, and even costs are limited. So this is also a concept of very affordable housing within the system of subsidized housing. Another challenge we face is that the household structure is changing dramatically. So the family household is not fitting to the majority of the people anymore, and it also doubled from 1951 to 2009 from 18 to 36%. The single family households. So we not only need a lot of more smaller apartments, but we also have to think of how can people connect within these single apartments. How can we introduce new forms of typologies that would encourage neighborly help, like cluster living or co-housing projects that will prevent loneliness and other problems that occur with this singularization. And in the end, I brought another number, and that is that between up to 2024, the share of people of 75 years plus will raise by 37%, so 46,000 persons more in Vienna by the year 2024. And this also means that these people might need care, and also diseases like dementia are growing very fast. So actually, this is also a problem of housing, because the normally care system was based very much on the idea of the family, of the wife that works at home and is doing this care work. And this changed dramatically in our society. So with the new housing, we have to think of other systems, of caring systems, and we have to integrate them into our housing projects. So these challenges that we face, they are somehow taken as a focus in these developer competitions I was talking about. So for instance, at some competitions you are asked to present special concept for single parents, for students, for intergenerational housing, for instance, or intercultural living. So this is then a special focus within the competition. And for instance, right now we have a competition that concentrates on timber structure for more ecological construction types within the city. And now this leads me to some examples I brought to you. I want to start with Wohnprojekt Wien. Actually, this was our first co-housing project we realized. I have to say that all these projects are realized within the system of subsidized housing, and it maybe gives you an idea of the range, the wide range of projects that we have in this field. So it is a co-housing project, which means that it is co-initiated and co-created by the future users, and with two major goals: to build together and to live together. So what actually makes the difference in this project is not so much the outcome, the architecture maybe, but it is the challenges of the projects, which actually doesn't start with an architectural idea or design, but it starts with a group. In this case it was 50 people that first created a vision of how they wanted to live together. And in their case it was 3 short sentences. There's a long version. It says they wanted individuality within community, in a communicative architecture, and they wanted to be a nucleus of sustainability within the city. But for private groups, it's often hard to find a site within the city, a central site that is affordable, because here they are also competing with developers. So we had the idea in this case that this group of people we met in 2009 could cooperate in a competition, in a developer competition with a developer, and we made a project teams and took part in the competition at Nordbahnhof, as a very central district in Vienna, for this site. And actually, within these 6 weeks, we had time to develop the main layout of the house with these 15 people and all the team. And it was actually the first time that a private group cooperating with a developer could win such a competition. So we not only had a big party, but it was also clear that these 15 people that were the association, that founded the association to buy the house from the developer, had to grow. They had to find their future neighbors, and they started first by doing so in info meetings. And after approximately 2 months, we had a group of 50 adults with whom we went into a participatory planning process. And this process consists actually of 3 levels. There is individual participation regarding your flat, the layout of your flat, the size of your flat. There is and each apartment therefore is different and looks different and fits your personal needs. And then there is a working group for architecture that actually takes all the decisions for the general areas and the community spaces of the project. And then for some really important questions, we really work with the whole group in workshops, for instance, for the programming of the community spaces or the distribution of the flats, who will live where in the house. So actually this is a very intense process with 50 people to design a house, and so many people that visit us nowadays when we guide them through the house say, how can this work with never-ending discussions and arguing all the time? And of course we learned also from all the projects that were organized by Basis Democracy, and we searched for a system that will allow quicker decision-making and a less complex process. So we found this form of sociocracy that we introduced as a system to work on this project, and it's based on working groups. And for instance, only one group of 10 people then took all the decisions with us in architecture, and then there were other groups for sustainability, solidarity, finance, and so on. And so these 50 people were working simultaneously on the project in different fields. So this brings me to the architecture and facts. Actually, it was finished 2013. It is a 7-story concrete building. It has a wooden facade. It houses 100 people approximately. It's 67 adults and 33 children of different age, different professions, and also different levels of income. So very diverse group. They live in 39 apartments organized along a central hallway. So each apartment is different, as I already showed you. We have really small flats, we have shared flats by students. And this was possible because we didn't design an object or a fixed design in the competition, but we tried to design a system that was open to adaptability for this inner layout of the house. It is not only housing, it also houses 350 square meters of office and commerce. Many people that live there also work there, like my office partner Marcos, he also has his flat there. And then there's this grocery store and cafe run by 8 persons of the house, so it's also self-organized. And we have a really large amount of community spaces. That was also possible because due to special reasons, we did not have to build so many parking lots. And we had space for community spaces in the basement that we enlightened with courtyards. There we have a big event space, we have a workshop, there's a community kitchen, and a children playroom that is transparent to the kitchen, but you can close the door and you don't hear the children. And the best place of the house, and that is also very important, is also dedicated to the community. So the whole rooftop is a community space, and for instance there they were designing a sauna, a library. We also have guest apartments and a rooftop garden. But the project even goes far beyond architecture, so as it was sustainability they wanted to reach, they also were thinking about mobility. They have a really big bicycle storage in the ground floor, a workshop for bicycles. They introduced a car sharing, a private car sharing with 6 cars in the project. And they also have vegetable gardens that they share, for instance, with the neighborhood. And in the end, on the economic side, it is also special because this group of people founded an association. You could also have made a corporation, but they made an association, and they bought the house from the developer. But it's not individual ownership, but a shared ownership. So it also prevents speculation, as Ronit already said. If you move out, you have to give it back to the association, and you cannot speculate with your flat. So after this project that was finished in 2013, and we already realized many more co-housing projects in Vienna, most of them in the subsidized housing sector. And this is a sign that not only the demand is growing, so people realize that there are alternatives and they are interested in, but also that the city of Vienna realized that these projects have a great potential for new urban areas. And the second project already that I want to introduce to you, it's the co-housing Gleis 21, already is the outcome of a special competition for co-housing. So the city of Vienna reserved plots in a new area near the main station of Vienna, so very central area, and the yellow spots you see are plots that the city reserved for co-housing projects. So private people, groups of private people could apply for these plots and to realize their co-housing project on these sites. So again, we made a project team with future users. They already built an association for the competition, and we made a concept, and the city was not only asking for an architectural and social concept in that case, but they also were asking for a concept for the ground floor to enliven the area, so public uses in the ground floor. So the group already made cooperations with cultural organizations, and because they wanted to realize a cultural zone with a restaurant and this culture event space, and that they would organize by themselves. So this is the team, the association. They are on their side after winning the competition. And actually it was finished 2 months ago, so I don't have pictures yet. This is a render. It is actually also a subsidized co-housing project. It's mixed use, 34 apartments, and it has its community spaces on the rooftop because the ground floor is public use. And what is also special that it is a timber construction. It has this balcony access points, so every apartment has 2 sides, this access balcony, and balconies, more private balconies on the other side. And the rooftop again is for the community, so it's a really nice rooftop garden with a kitchen, a sauna, a guest apartment, and a nice program. So, as I said, I don't have photos yet, but this is a photo from the construction or from the party. There always is a big party, of course, in these projects when we reach a certain point in construction. And these are some photos just before we finished. And what is important is that this cultural zone will start its program in October, so they also made a crowdfunding for that. And it will really be a lively part of this new urban development in the city. So there are 2 more projects I want to show you in very short, because I also want to point out that we do not only do co-housing and these very participatory planning processes, but we try to learn from these projects and also implement some elements of that in other projects. And one of them, for instance, is this subsidized housing project. It's also a winning project of a developer competition with Trans City Architects. We made a cooperation, 2 architects, 2 developers. It houses 129 units in 4 houses. It has also shared apartments and a kindergarten and community spaces, of course. And what is special about it is that the special theme here was intergenerational living. And what is special is that we not only introduced very many types of apartments in the project, but we also asked for intergenerational tandems to apply for this apartment. So if you would apply together, for instance, a young single mother with her father that would support her with the child, they were preferred to get the apartment. And the idea was that with these small social networks, that they will be the basis for a wider social network within this new housing area, would make it easier to take contact with the neighbors, and that they would establish a strong neighborhood that would support each other. So the apartments, they are all smart. Sometimes we try to make all apartments smart in the sense of very compact apartments, that they are affordable. And it was also flexible because we didn't know who will apply for the apartments, how many apartments of which size we will need. Is also very flexible ground floor system. So just some expressions from the entrance and the courtyard. And the last project, just a very short glance at that, is also interesting because actually it was a co-housing competition, and we could win it again. It's 80 subsidized housing units, but in this case we said we want to make a very inclusive project, very affordable and very collaborative at the same time. And of course co-housing projects are not so open to some groups in the society because you need to know the language. It's a very communicative project, and you need to have time, and not all people have so much time to invest in such a process. So in this case we made a cooperation with a social service organization, the Neuner House, and they are helping refugees and homeless people to integrate in the housing market. And we set up a really low threshold participation process, so that would need less time and also would be easier accessible for the people. And but to still keep the advantages of participation, that people will get to know each other, that they will be able to set up the rules together, and when they move in, they're already a community. So actually what connects all these projects, I think we do, and the projects in social housing, is that they are not only seen as a design, a construct of a building or construction, but they are seen as processes that not only form a building, but also forming a community. And it's a social process where people can get to know each other and organize themselves. And of course, if you guide such processes as an architect, it also changes the role or the sight that you have to have on yourself as an architect. And this is actually the idea of an architect that I grew up with, that you are the author of a design object, and it's a very controlled process, and you're very proud of because you controlled it. But in more complex times like we have, I think we need to rethink this role of an architect, and as we say, we have to see ourselves as moderators of these processes where people can take part in, and we of course have to guide it in the design sense, but we can also learn a lot along these processes by the people who are experts for living, as we say. And because many architects are afraid of participation, there was this wonderful exhibition in Munich that said, don't be afraid to participate, and it really also addressed architects. And I think this is very important, that you should not be afraid as an architect of participation, but you should encourage it. And what it encourages then, I think, is that it not only, the outcome is not only a building, but it is a community and a neighborhood. And this is, of course, also very rewarding for us as architects, if we see that the life works and that people really found a home in these new buildings. And so we said we also want to give new measures, or we want to change the system of measurement that architecture analyze very often. And that is, we didn't want to produce more square meter or more euro per square meter like developers might ask from us. But the aim was to create more love per square meter. And I guess in many projects we reached that goal. And therefore, I think you have to understand that architecture always is a part of the whole. And you cannot see it as a single, object. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention. So we can actually now start the film. It shows the Wohnprojekt Wien, the live. Yeah? Yeah. So it starts. So. Maybe the sound is not working. Well, actually it works, but we don't have it. Here. Yeah.
Place for others to feel the spirit of this house and to get in touch with what is happening here with the events and with the people.
We decided to place the more public infrastructure in the ground floor, so we have a coffee shop and the architectural office in the ground floor situated to the street. And we also have a community kitchen, the playroom, and the room for bicycles situated to the courtyard.
And the playroom is being wild and loud and everything we don't want to have in our flats. Half of us, I guess, are gardening out here. Most of us have something on the balcony. Yeah, hi, how is it going? And what are you growing there? And how is that growing well? And then you start watering and the kids start playing around and this is the typical Saturday, you know, things just happen. Sometimes I just take out the trash, not because I have to take it out, because I think I might need some more.
I've learned that in the Wohnprojekt, my personal space, it's the whole house and there's a lot more contact with the neighbors. This makes architecture, this space for conversation, for community, for meeting other people.
What we are going to do now is switch to our part of the world, and we have two speakers with us today, two architects, Suzanne Reddick, who's the principal of Suzanne Reddick Architecture, and Devin Golden, who's the principal at EYA. And so each of them will speak for about 10 minutes about their work, which will leave us some time, hopefully, to have a conversation with everybody. Okay. So, Suzanne?
see the housing in Vienna. I was in Berlin in June and saw the same configuration of housing, always around a large courtyard. And I was wondering why we are not doing it with developers. I'll show some of my work, and it's always around courtyard, but it's not regular developers. I think that the big problem here is income inequality. I came here in '75, and I remember that, I came to the US, and I remember that at the time, there wasn't such a large gap between productivity and wages. When productivity went up, wages went up. And so people earn more money, they can afford housing, and as Ronit said, when they earn more, they pay more, and it's visible. But now, in the last 40 years, productivity went up 80%, but wages are flat. So where is all the profit? The profit goes all to the shareholders. So who can really change the situation is businesses. Businesses have to think more about the people or the value of their companies. And the value of their companies are their workers. So they have to take care of their workers, they have to pay them more, and then we won't have this crisis of housing and healthcare. So this is something that kind of have to really change here, and I don't know where, but I think that some businesses start to think about it. And because someone that earns $10 an hour in the city or $15 an hour, there is no way they can afford any housing, period. And you have to have different people in the city. You have to have people that work in services and not just people that are wealthy. I'm going to show some of my work, and all the work that I'm showing the client is a church, an African-American church that asked me at the beginning to do affordable housing for them, and it was so successful that people in the city wanted to live there, and now most of these, or all of these buildings are mixed, and they are mixed with affordable and market rate. And that should be the model and not a segregation. Affordable is one place and one thing, and market rate is another thing. And here social housing or affordable housing is associated with many units, a large amount of units, cheap materials, and no one cares about the quality of life. And when I see the lecture before with that they really care about how people live and quality of life, and I think that we do the same. So I will start and just show some of the projects and show how architects can make a difference. So this is DC, and the top right, is there an arrow or something?
It's not showing about this. It just absorbs the light because.
Oh, okay, I see the right, yeah, so the top, yeah.
But it doesn't work.
Okay, here. Okay, the top, okay, 1 second, yeah. Okay, the top right here, you see a whole bunch. So I will show all these projects there that are along 7th Street and Rhode Island Avenue. The diagonal is Rhode Island Avenue.
Suzanne, all the green ones are your projects?
Yeah, all the green ones are my project in show in one neighborhood. Yeah. And I'm focusing on the 4-1 at the top right here. Okay, the first one is the one that you see on the chapter, that you see underneath is the UHOP, that's the United House of Prayer. That's a church. When they were building the church, I was not the architect, but they had a zoning issue with parking. So they came to me and I told them to buy anything around, so if they don't get an approval, then we can park within 400 feet from the church. So they bought all these lots, and then we got an approval with the zoning, so we had all these lots, and that's where I did the project. So the first one, the purple one, is 9 units. And at the time, no one used bay windows in commercial buildings or apartment buildings. It was just in townhouses, and that was the first time that I interpreted the DC code that I can use bay windows. So we added these large bay windows that added a lot of square footage. You see on the first floor it's retail, and that's how it is upstairs. So we added square footage, area, and the units were affordable, but eventually some of them are market rate and some are affordable. That's the next one, 626 S Street. And that was a lot that was for 2 townhouses, but the lot was very long. So I helped the client to change the zoning map to extend it from 7th Street, and we built an apartment building with 16 units around the court. So all the units have cross ventilation, at least 2 exposure. There is parking and outdoors. The same, this is half affordable and half market rate. By the way, developer came at the time to see, and then they built things similar in Logan Circle, and these are much nicer. That's inside. And you see that's the unit that have double height at the top because we took advantage of the loft situation. And this one is 1713 7th Street. On the first floor, we have 12 assistant units. On 7th Street, there is retail, but around the court, we have 12 assistant living units, and then on the top floors, we have apartments. And to create cross ventilation to all the apartments, we have bridges to the 2 stairs at the 2 ends. Instead of doing one rectangle with stairs at the end, and apartments have 1 exposure. All the apartments here have cross ventilation and 2 exposure. That's inside. And that's the last one on this block, and this is 626 Road, no, it's on Rhode Island Avenue. And the same thing, we had to change the zoning map here because it was a lot for townhouses, 2 townhouses, or no, there were 4 townhouses. So we did an apartment building, and that's the facade on Rhode Island Avenue. All the apartments here have balconies. There is a court, and there is a roof that all the tenants share. Indoor. And that's the garden. The next project is Baltimore, and I'm showing these slides because I wanted to show you some of the neighborhoods that we do the project. And this one was on Ashland Avenue, not too far from John Hopkins, but that was my neighbor. And when we were at the site there, some of these will fall every day. So that's our project. It's 6 townhouses around courts. Very simple, but also security was a big issue. So you can see there is a wall, it's enclosed, and then we didn't do small windows. We provide a lot of light and ventilation, and we have these very delicate bars, white bars, that give security but still allow light and air. So you see, the plans have to be very, very simple. You have 2 townhouses horizontally, 1 vertically, 2 horizontally, 1 vertically, and so on. The first floor always, it's just the kitchen along the service wall, and it's dining room and living room, and on the top floor 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Very, very simple, so really easy to construct. So you see the units around the trees. This is just when the project was completed. And you see the walls that kind of surround the property for security. And inside, ample of light and ventilation. This is one in Charlotte, North Carolina. And again, it's 6 townhouses. 1 vertically, 1 horizontally, and so on, vertically, and it's repetitive and also affordable. So these are the townhouses. And inside. And I'm showing the plan just to show that it's very, very simple, and it's really important to have very simple plans and to think how they are going to construct it very easily. That's the other one. And this is in Augusta. That's the last one that I'm showing in Augusta, Georgia. Very poor neighborhood. Most of the housing here is dilapidated. And we did 2 projects. The one at the top with the warm colors, it's kind of multifamily, and then we have single families, the purple and the blue one. So at the left you can see like the typology of the housing in the area. And then in the center, that's the multifamily that we did, and on the right, it's the single families. And it's important for us not just to have quality of life for the residents, but also to have architecture that belongs to the place. So that's the multifamily. And that's across the street, the single family homes. That's it.
We have the lone survivor still here, I appreciate it. So my name is Devin Golden. I'm Executive Vice President of Development and Acquisitions, partner at UIA. We're a development company based in Bethesda. We've been around for about 27 years and have built about 50 projects. And this has been fantastic. The last 2 presentations in particular were really cool about architecture. I do have a design background, but I also went back to business school, so I'm on the development side now, but I do work on design quite a bit, and within our organization focus on planning and design and community outreach, in addition to just general acquisitions and development. I'm not going to get into too much about who we are. I'm going to talk about a few projects, and they'll run the gamut from affordable housing developments we've done in partnership, or I should say mixed income projects we've done in partnership with various housing authorities around the region. And then get into stuff we're focused on right now, in addition to that, which is missing middle housing and how do we provide housing at a moderate price for people who are not necessarily qualifying for affordable units, but at that next tier, people earning 80 to 120% of area median income. And part of that is driven just by how expensive it is to live in the region. There's unlimited demand at that price point if we can figure out how to deliver housing. This is a project in Alexandria. So EYA, when we started, we were an urban infill townhome developer. Actually, Suzanne, a lot of the projects you were showing, 26 years ago, we were doing projects like that in DC and Arlington on a slightly larger scale, but similar. And then over time, got bigger and bigger and bigger as a development company. Our first mixed income project was in Old Town Alexandria. And I forgot to include a photo of what this used to look like, but I'll give you a sense. That upper right photo was what that used to look like. It was a few blocks from King Street in Old Town Alexandria, owned by the Alexandria Housing Authority, really well located, but at a very low density of about 6 to 8 units per acre. And it was Section 8 housing, so people earning below 30% of area median income, and had been an issue for a number of reasons, a lot of which we've talked about today, which is when you take everyone, poor people, and put them in a housing area that's all to themselves and feel stigmatized, it creates not only an unsafe environment, but not necessarily great outcomes for those who are living there. And so how do you create something that's safe, that's mixed income, where there's pride and ownership over the community that you're living in, and gives you and your children the ability to move up economically. So this was a project that had been a problem for the city of Alexandria from a safety perspective, and we took what had been a 6 to 8 unit per acre project and turned it into a 35 unit per acre project, very much within the context, scale, and feel of Old Town Alexandria. So we had to go through strict historic architectural guidelines here. You can see the houses and the styles look like everything you see in Old Town. And the way we did it was we mixed the unit types. And so on the left, you're seeing a mix of market rate townhomes that sold for, at the time, $400,000 or $500,000. Now they would sell for north of $1 million. But $1 million townhomes directly next door to affordable housing units. And these were not NPDU level 60%, 80% AMI. These were 30% and lower, largely voucher or people that were not working but were getting public assistance. But we mixed them in to where that townhome stick on the far left there has 4 affordable housing units within it, and it is directly next door to a market rate townhome that might sell for $700,000, $800,000. And so immediately, just by reconfiguring and redesigning and creating architecture that was attractive and of the neighborhood, you take people who had been living in poverty and put them in a location where they had pride. There is no poor door. Nobody knows that they're even walking into an affordable unit, and that's especially important for their children. And so you start seeing this mix of typology of units where you might have a full townhome unit on the backside of a 2/2 townhome unit where those are affordable, or a flat on the first floor. And so this is our first project that we did this, and it led to a number of other projects. Old Town Commons being our largest. We did this also in partnership with Alexandria. The upper right photo is what the project had looked like, and so fairly low density, a lot of surface parking, fairly well or unkept playground areas and landscape areas, and these 2-story buildings at about 6 to 8 units per acre. This is now a 45 units per acre community. But as you can see from the bottom right picture, the sense of scale, largely 3 and 4 stories. So we didn't do this with high-rise concrete. We did this in an affordable way with wood frame construction, and created an entire 8-acre neighborhood essentially that used to be a blighted part of the city where people, I would say people who didn't live there and people who lived there felt nervous about walking through it. And it's now the same number of affordable units. This project also was 30% AMI. There are some 60% AMI units in this project. But it's fully mixed and integrated into a market rate community where houses, once again, sell for $800,000 to $1.2 million. And the way we did it in this project is those middle 3 houses are market rate townhomes. And we took the left 2 what looked like townhomes and turned them into 3 3-bedroom flats. They're each about 1,100 square feet. And so you're able to fit a family within each of those levels of the units, and they look like individual townhomes. And the way we did it is one of those units, the door walks right into the first floor, the other one walks in, goes up a flight of stairs, and has 2 doors going to the upper level unit and the middle level unit. So absolutely nobody would ever know from the outside that you're walking into an affordable unit. And the only way, even out there today, that you can tell the difference is that the affordable units don't have a 4th floor loft and rooftop deck. And that's how we can tell today when we go out there. We created a park in the middle that has a playground. And once again, this is now a very mixed income community, and so you see people of different races, people of different socioeconomic circumstances playing together on the playground. There's a community center that the city built on the property as well that's heavily used and heavily integrated. And integration in, it's hard to talk about urban development and not talk about the history of race in this region, and so thinking about how these projects can also start integrating some of the neighborhoods in these areas. And so that's just a similar image. On the left here, that's a market rate condo building. On the right is an affordable rental building. There's a 12-unit affordable rental building owned by the Housing Authority. You basically can't tell the difference between the two, and you wouldn't know which one is which. And so even when you have buildings that are fully affordable, which are often a good idea at certain scale, doing them in a way that architecturally fits within the context is important. Capitol Quarter was our next big project. We did this in downtown DC, and so this was one where we had the luck of winning a deal from DC Housing Authority and then having the Nationals decide to move the baseball team to that area because we were there first. And so we tore down an area that had been known as Capra-Carlsberg, so one of the highest murder rates in the entire country regularly. For those of you who are from the DC region, I'm sure you know that and have heard of that over time. And this was a project where we partnered with the Housing Authority and took a large 7-block area and turned it into townhomes and mixed income apartments. And this one is really cool in that it's an urban neighborhood, it's in southeast DC, and it's the project I'd say the most where we run into people who live there throughout the planning community. So if I'm walking into a meeting in DC planning or interacting with somebody who works for the government in DC, you regularly meet people who either bought affordable units here or own some of the market rate units and have held on to them and love them, as well as real estate folks as well. This project is 60% affordable. So you have about 30% of the units are 30% AMI or lower, and area median income. So compared to the area median income of roughly $110,000, if you're at 30% or lower, your family earns $35,000 or lower. So that's about a third, 30% of the units. Another 30% of the units here are between 50 and 80% AMI, so what you'd call traditional affordable housing, and then about a third of the units, 35 to 40% are truly market rate. So once again, a project where you can have $1 million corner townhome right next door to somebody earning $50,000, right next door to somebody earning $25,000. So truly mixed community as well. And what's interesting down there is the schools are starting to integrate as well, as they have more and more people of different socioeconomic circumstances living there. Similar here, we have the triplex flats next to townhomes. We have duplexes as well, and we just mix them in. And the nice thing is you can have density, and it doesn't have to feel overwhelming. It doesn't have to be high-rise. It doesn't have to be big buildings. It can have light and air as long as you're planning it in a good way. Another project in Montgomery County. This is in partnership with the Montgomery Housing Partnership, where they had an old 2-story kind of rambling affordable housing project near the Purple Line, on the Chevy Chase Lake Purple Line. And so we partnered with them. We used the land and the value of that land in Chevy Chase, which is a wealthy neighborhood, to give them the equity needed to build a 200-unit mixed income high-rise building. We developed that in partnership with them. And so this went from 60 affordable units to 80. It gave them nice new units and replacement housing for what had been torn down. And then we built market rate townhomes mixed with affordable townhomes as well on the backside of that project. And this is, these are townhomes that sell for $1.4 million, $1.5 million, $1.6 million, right next door to affordable townhomes that sell for $250,000 to $300,000. And the great thing about our community in Montgomery County is that people actually, that's good. Like, we want to be mixed income. Even those buying $1.5 million townhomes get the social contract that we need to be doing here. Fort Totten is another project, so we're now looking at missing middle. I'll just show you this quickly. These are tiny 1,100 to 1,300 square foot 3-bedroom townhomes that we're doing near the Fort Totten Metro. These are not affordable. There are 30% of these are affordable, but most of these are market rate. And we're just trying to hit a market rate affordable price point of about $550,000 to $600,000 for a 3-bedroom house in DC, which is something hard to find. That's an image of what the architecture looks like. In the interior, they're small, they're tight, but they're open. So what Suzanne had just mentioned, this idea of simple architecture and open spaces allows you to make them a little bit smaller. And these are back-to-back units. And then the last project, really quickly, there's nothing to show on this quite yet, but I know the Purple Line Coalition folks are here. We're thinking about affordable housing on the Purple Line. We've been focused for years now, about 4 years, tying up a bunch of properties near the Littonsville Purple Line station between Silver Spring and Bethesda. We have some ideas here of communities that'll be in the 30 to 40% affordable range, 30 to 40% of the units, I should say, and has the opportunity to deliver about 400 affordable units to the market as we start working on this project. So happy to follow up and talk to other folks that are involved in that, but the concept here is, once again, a mix of townhomes, a mix of apartments, some in partnership with HOC, some private projects of our own, some in partnership with a nonprofit, but mixing it into what is a great stable neighborhood already today, and creating better access to transit, some retail on the first floor. So anyway, that's who we are, that's what we do, and a lot of this comes from being able to partner with great organizations and thinking about design in an interesting way, in a creative way. And then finally, as an organization, we tend to have people that we're developers, we have investors, and obviously we care about that. But second to that also is a lot of us come to work at EYA because we like to do well by doing good. And there's a really sense within the organization that giving back is extremely important, whether it's through affordable housing or sustainability. So thank you very much for having me, and you guys all get good home, I think.
I know it's getting late, but we'll just take a minute of like 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll continue the conversation out with the reception. So are there any comments, questions for our 3 speakers? Yes.
There hasn't been anything mentioned specifically about the housing and transportation affordability nexus, and I wonder if you could speak about your projects and how the cost of parking and the availability of walkability and options other than cars figures into the design and the economic feasibility of your projects.
Okay, the project that I showed in DC, they are all in one block, and they have 2 subway stations within few steps. So a lot of people don't have a car that use the public transportation. In Baltimore, they have parking, and I'm sure that they use the car. The same thing in Charlotte and in Augusta, because the distances just to get to a grocery store or to any place is quite far. So it's different when you design in the city and when you design in a rural area.
Yeah, I'll add on to that too. So EYA, when we were founded 27 years ago, our tagline is life within walking distance. And so in the kind of mid-90s, when people were kind of going out and out further into the suburbs, we started doing urban projects in Arlington and Old Town Alexandria. And so one of the things, we look for a few key things for us as we make investment decisions. It has to have walkability, and walkability can be either to transit, it can be to retail amenities, parks, open spaces, things of that sort. And so we do find amongst our purchasers, whether they're the affordable and renters, whether they're affordable units or the market rate units, is a much lower percentage of people who drive to work, much lower percentage of car ownership within those projects, even in a suburban context. There are communities we build in where people need to have a car for some of their life errands, but if you can get them out for some of the day, whether it's getting to a restaurant or a grocery store or going to work, it's really helpful. And it does, of course, bring down the overall cost of housing, which is extremely important. We're now just starting to look at projects where we might provide car share and think about other ways to reduce the actual ownership of cars even further. And so we'll see, we have to test that to see what the market acceptance of that is over time in these projects. In Europe, you guys have much more luck with that.
Yeah, and in Vienna, of course, we have a very good public transport system. So if you live within the city of Vienna, even have to live central, but actually always have access to public transport, so you don't need a private car. And actually, I think in Vienna the private car ownership is decreasing, and actually, of course, this has to be the goal, that within the city you should not be forced to use a car. And of course, we have this problem also in the suburbs of Vienna, that not all parts in the suburbs of Vienna are good reachable by public transport.
My question is mostly about the investors of the EUIA, specifically about what sort of tactics do you find to generate revenue within the affordability sort of model that is specifically enticing to investors, or is it mostly driven by their, buying into the motto that you can do good by doing well?
That's a great question. So we have two tiers of investors. We have equity investors who are outside of our company, and then ourselves, we invest in ourselves. And so the way we look at our projects, we could go buy a site and build 50 market rate townhomes by ourselves, which we do. Or we can buy a site in partnership with a housing authority, let's say, and build 50 market rate townhomes and build 40 or 50 or whatever affordable units. And the way our model works is for the affordable units, we get a fee, just like anybody building a development would. We don't get profit from that, but we do get a fee that covers overhead. And then for the market rate units, they're just like any other market rate project, and so we make profit there. So where EYA has specialized over time is we're more willing to go into complex, difficult deals in order to tie them up, whereas most developers, it's not worth their time. So I might spend, as I just have, quite frankly, I might spend 3 or 4 years trying to win an affordable housing partnership with an HOC or a DC housing authority, and all the difficulty that goes along with that, both from a legal perspective as well as a design perspective and approvals perspective, because in the end, I'm getting units that are really well located that are going to return a profit, and I get to also work on this great, really cool, exciting project. If there wasn't the profit motive on the market rate units, it would be hard to justify the time and my time personally to go after that project. And so there is this great nexus there. And in addition to that, because mixed income is becoming so much more important, creating communities that aren't just affordable, there's more and more of these types of opportunities out there. And a lot of the counties and the housing authorities that own land where these types of projects make a lot of sense.
One more question, and then I'm going to get the final word here.
I had a couple questions for EYA. And
you only get one.
Well, they'll focus on the very high density units where you were several units at 30% AMI. Are those all for rent, or are they for sale units?
Great question. So in those projects, the 30% AMI units were owned by the authority. So essentially, we built the projects, handed over those units to the Alexandria Housing Authority, the DC Housing Authority, and then they rented those units out to their renters or people who were on their wait list to get low-income units. For other projects we do in the region, when we're doing MPDUs, for example, in Muckerman County, which are moderately priced dwelling units, we will sell townhomes, 50 to 60% AMI, so you'll have a house that's, whatever, 800,000 or whatever. That's market rate directly next to a 3-bedroom house that sells for 250, depending, and up to 400 for a workforce unit. In DC, we do the same thing. So it really depends on the project and if we're partnered with a housing authority.
Same, I have a really burning question. I don't really like to close down the floor. Yes, one burning question.
A question. To quote something that Mr. Goldman said, you said that there's an unlimited market for housing in this range, as if only we could figure out how to build it. So you've shown us some examples. So what does it take to get you to be able to build all these other developments that are needed?
Yeah, that's the critical question, right? So we are lightning focused on how we can deliver housing in urban locations that is less expensive to build, and it's getting harder and harder to do so. The cost of construction is going up. You know, Montgomery County alone, if I'm building a townhome, I'm paying typically $50,000 in fees, and that's on top of land, and that's on top of hard costs and soft costs. So to get to a point where you can actually deliver a house and sell it for $550 and make your investor even remotely happy, it's extremely difficult. The things that we're looking at in order to do it, number one, is obviously reducing size, and so we're getting smaller units and more compact units. And it does seem that millennials now buying houses are more open to that concept. In some cases, one car instead of two, so you can get an extra bedroom on the first floor is helpful. Finish levels are not quite as high-end as they may have been in the past, and that's something that a lot of younger people aren't as, they don't care as much about. They're just really looking for a place where they can have 3 bedrooms. Bedroom sizes are getting smaller too. So that's nibbling around the edges of trying to get the hard costs lower, but a lot of it does come from land. So the best places we can do it, I'll give you an example. Littonsville, right on the purple line, is a perfect example. Where there's publicly owned land, whether it's owned by HOC, Housing Opportunities Commission, or it's owned by WSSC, the Sanitary, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, or it's owned by the county as they do there. That's really where you have to get the biggest bang for the buck, because you have the ability as a partner, somebody who actually has the public interest at heart, and thus could potentially subsidize housing and get a project to work at a lower land basis, and that starts helping. The next piece, which is really critical, is the county passed a bill a number of years ago where if you do more than 25% affordable housing, you don't pay school or transportation impact taxes. So that saves $30,000 a house in cost right there, and that allows you to subsidize more affordable. So there's a whole bunch of tools that you have to use, and every project's a little different. I'd say the next piece was we need the state of Maryland to have a much more robust LIHTC program. We need more credits. And it's just so, low-income housing tax credits, it's so competitive right now to get them. And the state's great, they have a wonderful housing office. But we need the state government to subsidize more housing. We need more. It's the only way we're going to solve the problem. And we need it to flow to places like Montgomery County where the need is so strong because it's so expensive to live there. Right now, it generally gets pushed more towards Baltimore. So there's a whole bunch of things, both a mix of what government can do, a mix of what the private sector can do, and then a mix of what the market will bear.
I'm going to close it. We're going to continue with the reception. So one of the things that I've been thinking about as I've been listening to you, I've been thinking about some of this conversation and what the Viennese have offered to us today, is the question of how we frame the question and the importance of that. There's a little project out there that we'll have a conversation about in a couple of weeks. It's the Rapido Housing Project. And the Rapido Housing Project is one that came out of an office in Texas where they asked the question, we know there's going to be hurricanes every year, we know there's going to be floods every year, we know people are going to lose their housing, how come we can't plan ahead? How come we can't get into a point in which we're ready to go? And why are we asking the question of how do we house people quickly and efficiently, as opposed to asking the question, how do we do so in a way that seeds a permanent revitalization of this community? And that project not only figured out how to do it, and figured out something that's very challenging in our environment, how to combine HUD money, which is the money, FEMA money, which is the money that comes in an emergency, with HUD money, which is the money that actually comes to kind of rebuild. And showed how it could be done in half the price and be built in the community, and design a house where the pieces are stored in a lumberyard in the areas we know are vulnerable, and 2 people in a truck can rebuild those houses, half the houses in those communities, and see the next one. So what I'm hearing, and what I really appreciate from the gift from the Austrians, is the extension of our frame. Is the extension of the frame, not just in terms of the area, the size of the places we're thinking about, but to include the idea of social housing versus affordable housing. To think about the impact of, that we measure value in terms of how much love is produced, right? What are those shared spaces? How does that extend into the quality of life we're offering for people? And how do we think about this long-term investigation as opposed to the trailer solution we do for refugees, right? Into longer things. So it sparks me, and I really appreciate it, and I think we have a lot to learn from this exhibit, but how we change our frame and make the arguments in our society that's not just about, because right now the currency is money, but it's not just based on that currency. And so when I think of Evansville, for example, historically African-American community, how is that part not elevated into, our conversation, right, and our plans, which I'm sure it became part of it. So I want to thank everybody for pushing us for this conversation today, for our partners in Moco County, and our partners in the City of Vienna, and in the Austrian Cultural Forum, and for all of you folks who stayed for this conversation. Hopefully it will continue. There's a lot of work to be done. And welcome everybody. Tomorrow, if you're interested, the conversation continues in the Rockville Council building. There's information online, and that's set up more as a public forum. The exhibit is open until October 20th. Please come and spend time with it and tell others about it. And if you have any questions, I am the only Renique in the School of Architecture. Please tell people to reach out to me. Thank you very, very much.